we would like to invite you to a back to school series with BNT.
We are thrilled that you are the kind of teacher that is ready to go and dive into some practical and creative planning with us.
This mini series is going to take you through 5 days, 5 categories of prep, and about 5 minutes each, with inspiration to ensure your back to school season is fun, really fun for both you and your students, and also to set you up for a successful academic year ahead.
Head to bravenewteaching.com/back to school and you'll be ready to join us and look at classroom setup, community building, teacher meal prep, getting ready with us, and even our #1 first day of school lesson plan.
Again, that is bravenewteaching.com/back to school to make sure you don't miss any of it. We'll see you there. Well, hello and welcome back to Brave New Teaching, and welcome to a little back to school mini series is what this has become. Hi, Amanda.
Oh, hi, Marie. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. I am actually very excited for our listeners to hear today's interview because while behavior management is one of the most frequent topics, it's also one of the most difficult topics. And I love how our guest today, Claire English from the Unteachables, has a not even necessarily a completely fresh perspective, but the way that she articulates her perspective is so specific and simple and clear. And I am a big fan. And I'm really I can't wait for our listeners to hear from her.
Well, I have a sneaking suspicion that a very large majority of our listeners have liked one of her posts recently.
For sure.
Okay, so Claire's Instagram is brilliant. It's huge, but the reason that you probably liked it is like everything that she shares is just so on the nose. A lot of her content are thoughts, right? They're ideas, they're kind of statements. Like one she posted before, like it's got like a ton of likes. She wrote, "Yes, students need great teachers, but great teachers need great leaders." So you'll see a lot of her like text types of reels. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of likes on these spot on observations.
Because they are, like you said, they are directly on the nose. Like it takes the thought that was a little bit foggy out of my head and puts it down into text that I go, that was it. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Exactly.
Like,
well, okay, let's talk a little bit about Claire, and then I think we can probably just jump into the interview because it really does speak for itself quite a bit. So she is an experienced Australian secondary English teacher and senior leader. She specializes in supporting students with complex social, emotional, and mental health needs. Over her career, she has worked across the United Kingdom and Australia, dedicated to transforming volatile, challenging, and chaotic learning environments into places of safety, support, and learning. And the coolest part is that she's got a book that is, by the time you are hearing this podcast, everybody, her book is out. It has been out for about a month, and it is her first publication that takes all of those really poignant and on the nose things that she can articulate in something like an Instagram post, and then explains the really actionable strategies for making those things a reality in your classroom, on your campus, etc. And it's a very valuable resource for educators of all levels, in fact.
Claire's book is called It's Never Just About the Behavior. And I think that this is so timely for all of us as we're getting ready or in back to school mode. This is kind of one of the most prized territory times of the year to really and I don't say that like you have to do 1,000 things, but I think your head is definitely here, right, in this space pretty heavily this time of year, maybe more so than it is other times, and rightfully so. So if you're really thinking about this stuff for yourself, for the future of this classroom, this school year, this interview is going to, I think, do a couple things. I think one, it's going to reassure you that you are heard, seen, and there are probably a lot of things you're doing right. It might challenge you a little bit, but ultimately I think it's going to give you direction for where you want to head and the things you need to go that direction. So we're really excited for you guys to meet Claire, and hopefully we get to have her back on the podcast again sometime soon.
I would absolutely love that. All right, friends, with no further ado, we hope you enjoy today's interview with Claire English from the Unteachables, and it's time to cue the music.
You're listening to Brave New Teaching, and we are so much more than a podcast.
We give teachers the inspiration, support, and tools to challenge the status quo.
I'm Amanda, and I'm a former English teacher from Illinois.
And I'm Marie, and I'm a teacher from Southern California.
Join us at bravenewteaching.com to find out more about our courses, festivals, and get every episode's show notes.
We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the show. All right, everybody. We are so happy to have with us today Claire English from the Unteachables. Yes, welcome to the Brave New Teaching podcast. And we would like to just give you a moment, a little opportunity. Tell us about yourself, your teaching experience, and like what brings you here today with us.
Marie, Amanda, thank you so much for having me onto your brilliant podcast. I love it. It's so nice to be here. And I've known you in the Insta world for a little while as well. So I think we spoke about it just before we came on the air that it's so nice to kind of actually be speaking to you because I feel like I have known you. And it's such a big can of worms to open to say, tell me about your teaching experience.
I know.
What's led you to that? I'm going to give you the short, long version because all of these kind of little parts are really important to why I do what I do. Well, first of all, I'm Australian, as you can tell with my accent. I've been teaching for about 14 years in different capacities. I'm an English teacher. That's my bread and butter to start off with. I've been the head teacher of learning support and teaching and learning. I've been the assistant principal of a school very specifically for students who are the most vulnerable in London and they have significant social, emotional and mental health needs. And those are the kind of things that manifest in really challenging behaviours. So I've always kind of gravitated towards the contexts where students do have those really big behaviours. I grew up myself in a really low socioeconomic area of Sydney, Western Sydney, and primary school was really great for me. I was in all the gifted and talented classes, like I loved English, I loved learning, I was really, I was there for it. But then secondary school, things took a really big dip because my mum's mental health worsened and overnight I became pretty much like an 11-year-old psychologist and a homemaker. So things really deteriorated for me. And that was pretty much for the rest of my my childhood and my young adult life. And because of that, my behaviours at school deteriorated. I became really disconnected. I became really disillusioned. My own mental health deteriorated significantly. And looking back now, you can kind of look at that through an adult lens and understand that a little bit more.
Sure. That perspective is a little bit, clearer, right?
Yeah. But at the time, you just feel like so disconnected and so alone. And school became a very unsafe place for me. Psychologically speaking, because all of a sudden I was a bad student, I was a lazy student, I was a rude student, I was a student who was, isolated and it was horrible. It was a horrible experience for me, all but one teacher, because I went through school and, year after year, I didn't have any teacher that really saw any potential in me. All of a sudden I went from that student with all this potential to a student who had nothing really. And I had this one teacher, my English teacher, Miss Povey. Go the English teachers. I feel like they're always the ones that people talk about when they leave school. She didn't give a crap that I wore my eyeliner too thick. She didn't give a crap that my skirt was too short or, that maybe I was sleeping in late and coming to school late. What she cared about was that I did English and that I aced it because she knew that I was good at it. She saw that potential. And I nearly dropped out. Like my parents were saying to me, go and do hairdressing because school clearly isn't for you. You are clearly not somebody that can be academic. You need to leave school and do something else. I was wasting their money. Like being at school, I really was wasting their money. But Miss Povey kept me there. And I wish, I've tried to reach out to her. I can't reach out to her. I don't know where she is. She's a big hippie. She's probably living in the mountains somewhere. But I got to the end of my schooling and I was there at the award ceremony as one of the highest placed people in English in my school, which was incredible. I was receiving awards to the surprise of a lot of my teachers. So I always saw education as a bit of a cycle breaker. I saw people just need somebody there as a way to kind of like a golden ticket out of whatever crap they're going through. But then I got in the classroom. So I had this really, really strong why. But even with that really strong why, even with my own experience of education that was quite isolating and damaging and quite traumatic for me, I quickly became overwhelmed with the behaviors that I was facing. So what did I do? I sent kids out. I isolated them. I yelled at them.
Yep.
Like I did all of the things that I experienced myself and that I told myself I wanted to be the opposite of. And now I know that the reason we do that as teachers is because when we're drowning, we fall back on the strategies that we know. We fall back, and I like to call it our inherited classroom management, because we're just flailing. We've got nothing else, so we grab onto anything tangible that we can. And it's usually the stuff that we've experienced ourselves, and it's something that's really hardwired within us. Luckily, I had amazing mentors, and they gave me just enough skill to go, oh my gosh, like light bulb moment, I can do this. I can feel empowered. And that set me off on this journey to become a big nerd about classroom management, really, and learn as much as humanly possible about behavior and classroom management, so I could show up in the way that I knew that I needed to for my students, whilst also teaching the rest of the class, the other 23 students that are there ready to learn, and the other 7 are off doing their own thing. So since my second year of teaching, I have told myself that one day my main job is going to be supporting teachers around classroom management. And I was horrible at classroom management when I said that, but I guess you could say that I'm in the right place, because I've always, I knew how desperately teachers needed this, but also students that were just like me, or like far more complex in their behaviours and their presenting needs needed teachers. So that's the long short of what I do and why I do it.
How many years did you spend in the classroom before you were then in a more supportive capacity? How long were you a classroom teacher?
So I've been a classroom teacher the entire time. I've always been in the classroom, even in my even in my assistant principal role, I was always still in the classroom in some capacity. So I've never really stepped out of it until now, because I'm between countries. So I just moved from London in February, and I'm in between moving to Australia. So I've got a year here in New Zealand where I'm just focusing on the Unteachables, and then I'll go back into something when I get back to Australia. So I really miss it. This is the first time in 14 years, I mean, besides maternity leave, that I haven't been in the classroom. And yeah, I do miss it.
Okay, so I really want to talk about your book. I mean, that's all I really want to talk about. But in your intro, you shared something that's actually been on my mind a lot, and I'm guessing is probably a lot of what's in your book too, but I think it's so interesting to reflect on as women in education, kind of mid-career teachers. I left the classroom after 13 years of teaching, so I think we're kind of all in the same age range. It's just so interesting to look back on both our own education and what we've done with students, and I'm noticing so much more how tied together behavior and expectations for success are. I think I always kind of knew, right? That they were connected, right? Good behavior meant that you were able to pay attention and therefore able to learn better. And those were kind of those very surface level things that sat in my mind. And we've just had a couple episodes in the spring where I talked about my trip through learning about my own ADHD diagnosis. And one of the things I talked to a lot of my counselors and therapists about is I was always told that I was a good student. I was always well-behaved student. And there is so much about me that got missed because behavior, the presented behavior, just put so many periods at the end of sentences that really had ellipses and commas and question marks. And whether you're a well-behaved student or a problem student, right? I say that both in air quotes. I feel we've really started to, or we had, and I think we're trying to break this cycle, but categorizing students by behavior long before we've really gotten to know them academically, culturally, and any other format. And I hear that in your story. How is it possible that you went from being a gifted student to a bad student? That doesn't even sound like it's possible. And it's just crazy how that's still being missed, even from when we were kids. And now I feel this is still such a need.
Yeah, it's a label that's placed upon us based on what people see, isn't it? And it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy, because the more that people are seeing you in a certain way and the more that you're hearing those messages, it's the Gollum effect. I don't know if you've heard of the Pygmalion and the Gollum effect. The Pygmalion effect is when people believe in us and people, show that we can do something and they're reflecting that to us. The chances of our success are so much greater in the classroom if we have a teacher that really does believe in us. The Gollum effect is the opposite of that. When we are hearing these messages that we can't do it, they're putting that glass ceiling over us, and all of a sudden we become students that are fulfilling that. It's a really sad thing that does happen, and I make a point of saying that I'm never going to shame a teacher for doing these things, because I've done it myself, and it's just about being really aware of what we're doing and being able to break those cycles for ourselves.
Yeah. On so many levels. I mean, I was really surprised to reflect and think, oh, I wish somebody would have not given me that label of even being a good kid, because there was a lot that was missed even on that end. Because I feel like I always paid attention in my classroom to the kids who were struggling, right? Academically, behaviorally, that's really where my lens was. And I think I missed a lot from kids who were presenting with good behavior and having everything together.
Yeah, there's so much that I could talk about around the label of gifted and talented, and then how I felt going from being gifted and talented to not being gifted and talented. There's these labels that are placed upon us, and both ways it can be quite problematic. And I say it really carefully about gifted and talented, because people are really strong about talking about GAT classes, but it can be quite problematic. And Amanda, you're an example of how so much underneath was missed, because you just had it is just the shell. You were able to comply, and just because you're able to comply, it doesn't mean that you're engaged and learning and happy and all the rest of it. It shouldn't be about the compliance.
It's the same thing that happens with advanced placement, our AP 100%.
Classes. I was just going to say that.
The way that even my own colleagues, and I've caught myself talking, well, that's an AP kid. And I'm like, any kid can be an AP kid. And I wasn't an AP kid. I didn't take any AP or honors classes. And what did that say? And a lot of times lately, especially in the since 2020 landscape that I've been teaching in, a lot of times the pressure that is put on our kids who are quote unquote an AP student is what drives them to do some really dumb stuff because they want to live up to their own label. Okay, before we started recording, everybody, we were talking about how we need to rename Brave New Teaching just Teaching Side Quest Conversations, because this is all we do is surprise. Can we talk about your new book? I want to hear about where you got the idea to write a book, why it's never just about the behavior. Where what's the origin story? What's the side quest of your book? Okay.
Let's go on some side quests.
Yes.
Well, It's Never Just About the Behavior, because so often classroom management is approached in that way, isn't it? And we just kind of touched on it then. It's focusing on, behaviors happened. There's this behavior. What can we do about it? When actually most of classroom management, 70, 80, 90% of classroom management is before any challenging behaviors are seen. And that's the classroom management that, if that's missed, it's so disempowering for teachers, because they don't realize how much they have control over. We can't control little Jimmy coming into the class and saying F off. We can't control that student. We can control everything around the context of our class. We can control what we do. So it's what I like to call crafting an island of safety in our classroom. And that's through everything we do. It's our own regulation. It's the consistency of our practice. It's how clear we are when we're presenting a task and how we differentiate that task. It's how we're modeling and teaching our expectations. It's everything that we do. It really is everything. And it's just an amalgamation of that last 14 years that I spoke about. Everything I teach teachers, it's through the lens of my own lived experiences and trial and error. And I think that's what's missing. And it's action, action is missing, relatable, applicable action in the classroom. And I think my values around teaching, I think it's very clear that I take an approach that is what people would call trauma-informed or restorative. But what happens is when people teach about trauma-informed practice, people's eyes glaze over, don't they? Yeah. You know why? Because it doesn't teach what to actually do. It teaches a values system. It teaches restoration. It teaches how to have, really important. And that is an important part of classroom management, how to have that dialogue with students. But it actually leaves teachers who are really wanting to be the kind of teacher that lives these values, that want to be compassionate and calm and authoritative rather than authoritarian. It leaves them quite disillusioned and switching off because they're like, okay, well, they're trying to push this approach on me, but you're not telling me what to do in the classroom. You're not giving me any strategies to actually be the teacher that I want to be. So of course I've got to still give them detentions. Of course I've still got to, make them feel ashamed of their behaviors. So it's never just about the behavior, really is a way of being as a teacher. So it's 7 pillars of how we can approach our teaching. So be calm, be compassionate, be consistent, be challenging. So it's all of the kind of ways that we can be as teachers. But so it's underpinning that with values, but then it's all about the action. How can we actually do that in our classrooms? And it's everything that I wish that I could turn the clock back and have, rather than having to go on a 14-year trial and error self-discovery. I was just going to
say trial by fire.
Yeah.
Would you share with us one of the strategies that you share in your book? Maybe your favorite one, or maybe the most accessible, brand new teacher or wherever we are in our career, and I am struggling with something. What is one of your most accessible, we could do it tomorrow sort of strategies?
So the one thing I think that teachers would, every time I put it out there, what are you struggling with? Low-level behaviors are the things that come up, aren't they?
Yeah, sure.
So every time I talk about this one strategy, whether it's on my podcast, whether it's in my courses, whether it's on my Instagram, this is the one strategy that people come back immediately and say, this has been a light bulb. This has changed everything about what I do in my classroom. So if I could get teachers to just do one thing in their classroom tomorrow and it would have an enormous amount of impact, I use a strategy from Michael Grinder's Envoy called Approachable and Credible. I don't know if you've heard of Envoy before. I was very fortunate to do Envoy training in my second year of teaching, and it's all about the nonverbal strategies we use in the classroom. This has kind of been the foundation to everything that I do, because it's so powerful when we start to craft our nonverbals. So approachable and credible. All of us have these 2 nonverbal modes that we can be in any given time, and we're constantly swapping between them, but we need both of them. We need to, right now, you and I, we're being credible, we're talking, we're being really casual, we're being conversational. So when we're approachable, we are more conversational, we're more casual, we might be talking with an upwards inflection, we're leaning on our chairs, we're walking quicker, we're the pace around the room that we're moving is quicker. So we're more open to things coming at us. We're more open to conversation, we're modeling a more approachable vibe. Credible is the opposite of this. It's when we embody stillness. It's when we embody quiet. We're more serious in our approach. We are talking slower with a downwards inflection, just like this, rather than talking quickly or, more conversationally. We're being more direct. So we're not opening up the conversation. We're being more direct in our instruction. We're slower. Our weight is distributed evenly on our feet. So all of those little nuanced things we have to embody when we're being credible. The biggest mistake, and I have observed over my career hundreds of teachers in the classroom, and the biggest mistake I see teachers making, especially when it comes to low-level behaviors, is embodying the approachable rather than the credible. And we're expecting a credible vibe in our room when we're wanting students to get cracking with their work and do what they need to do. We are needing them to be credible. We're needing the room to have that vibe. But very often we are still embodying the approachable. And it really is as easy as flicking a switch, because it's all about modeling. You're modeling the energy that you want back from your students. So if you want your students to be quietly working at their desks, but you're saying, hey, James, can you please come and hand that up to the table? Or you're running around to the rest of the class, or you're going over to that student and pacing around. And that is not modeling what you want from your class at that moment. If you're wanting them to get started on their starter activity, but you're, flipping around the room and like moving here, moving there, and like kind of calling things out, and that is not modeling the energy that you want back from your students. So it is as easy as that. I think episode 8 of the Unteachables podcast, I talk about low-level behaviors and I go in more depth with that strategy, and I hope that I've done it any justice talking about it. But the easiest way to remember, so if you go into a classroom tomorrow and you want to be more credible rather than approachable, and remember, like, both are important. Like, you need to be approachable to connect with your students, but there are times and places for both things. But if you're ever in doubt, ask yourself in the moment, right now, am I modeling what I want to see back from my students? What are my nonverbals saying to my students around what I expect? Because whether we're talking or not, we are sending constant messages to the young people we're teaching. And I hope that all makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I can feel myself like in those moments recognizing like something's not right, but never having those words to explain it.
I was going to say just the articulation of, or like the temperature check of what am I modeling right now, I think is like, it's so deceptively simple because truly it's simple, but it's so hard. We were also talking before we started recording about being parents, right? And it's the same sort of an idea. What I'm expecting out of my own children, like I asked you to please go and put your pajamas on and brush your teeth. And then I'm doing maybe the dishes or 16 other things. Like there's a difference between what I'm expecting and what I'm modeling. And I mean, this is kind of a non-example because it just depends on their age, and running a household is not quite the same as a classroom, but isn't it? Like there's still an ecosystem that we are like modeling, and we're there and we're doing a lot, right? So
well, when your toddler's having a tantrum, like I'm thinking about like my little girl's 18 months old, when she is having a big meltdown, what is going to help her in that moment? It's modeling the calm that I want to see from her, that I'm trying to co-regulate with her. And like these nonverbal strategies are just about co-regulation. But again, when we talk about like a trauma-informed approach and people say, oh, we need to co-regulate with our students. Well, what does that actually look like in practice?
What does that even mean?
What does it even mean? Like, let's actually break it down for teachers. What can you do tomorrow in your classroom? That's so important, isn't it?
Claire, I know we talked about side quests. I have one more. This is not a question that we prepped you for, but at time of release, like this episode, if people are listening to it live right now, it is back to school season in the States. And I think this is the time that people are really thinking about classroom management, especially kind of like that 70%, right? That people are trying to set expectations, create routines. They're kind of in the thick of this. Are there a couple of other strategies that you would point people to, or like chapters in your book that you would say are really going to be helpful for kind of thinking through this time of year specifically for students and teachers?
You haven't prepped me for that question, but I'm actually...
I did not.
But I'm actually putting together...
You thought about it. Back to school is the time.
I think I've thought about it a couple of times, but I'm also actually just putting together, because I've had to think, because you can... Like, I could just give you my whole book and say, do this. But, like, I've had to break it down into, like, that's not helpful, is it? I'm doing because I've got this behavior club starting, and I'm doing a monthly focus on back to school, like how to start the year strong. And I'm like, crap, what do I put in here? Like, that I'm not going to just go into like a 10-hour seminar around. And the things that I have, the 3 things that I've broken it down into is the way that we set expectations. And I start it by saying, if you walked into a classroom on the first day and your teacher sits you down and says, right, these are the things we're not going to do, and if you do these things, then this is what happens. How do you feel about learning? How do you feel about the teacher, the environment? Some students might be like, oh, it's all part and parcel with it. I'm fine, because they've got the skills to, do what they need to do. But some students, that's an instant, and it's the ones that you will most likely be approaching about their behavior. They're going to be the students that switch off from that conversation the most, and you're going to find it very hard to get them back. So approaching expectations in a way that's more collaborative and being a little bit more like savvy around how you approach them. So I always would go into it by having a lesson. And I do have a podcast episode about this as well, I think, but going into it, approaching it as like a lesson, like what even are expectations and why are they important? Like some students actually don't connect the dots. Like conceptually, they just see it as something that's being forced upon them. But actually, expectations, where do you see them in your real life? Do you play a sport where you're expected to do certain things? Like are there like, boundaries around what you can and can't do? Why are these important? I start by modeling it from like, what are the expectations you have of me as your teacher? Mm-hmm. Like if I don't do that, what happens, And Absolutely. Then I kind of model the process of collaboratively setting expectations that are fair, that aren't just black and white rules, through the lens of like, okay, let's talk about me and what you expect. And now let's put it back and talk about what we expect in this room together. So really approaching expectations in a way that gets buy-in and becomes a beautiful part of your class culture, not something that sits up on the wall, but something that becomes what you talk about, you live, you breathe, you're modeling through your nonverbals, like it's everything that we do in the classroom. Expectations aren't just like a one and done. Let's talk about this, let's talk about why they're important, and then let's live them in the day-to-day. The next thing is getting on top of those parent-carer dynamics. I always write a list of the students who I've got in the following year that have been flagged to me. And I hate that we have these preconceived ideas of the young people that we teach, but it's very important for us to kind of have an idea of the ones that have had a really rough year the year before. I write a list of those down and then I make those my key parent contacts. And I just spend a couple of weeks going through the list and calling them and saying, hey, like I'm so excited that Bill's in my class this year. Like I know he had a really rough year in English. What do you think is going to help break this cycle? And be really candid about it. Like I want to work with you. I don't want to work against you. Like just being really open and being human about it and not waiting until something bad happens for us to make that first call, like getting ahead of it. So that's what I always do with the students who might be a little bit more challenging with their behaviors. And trying to establish, the third thing I've been kind of putting together is establishing a beautiful class community. I hate some icebreakers. I think that they're so cheesy. I think like I hate sitting. I hate doing icebreakers. If I'm in a professional development with people I don't know, I'm like, oh bloody hell, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do this. So I think about myself. It's like quite scary for students. Like it takes a lot of courage to stand up and do certain things with icebreakers. So I do like really low stakes icebreakers that I can kind of like follow on with that through the year. Like I do a class playlist and then, during transitions, every single week I do a new student song to do transitions or to enter the room. And then we can have a discussion around that. I do like just random what would you rather questions at the end of every lesson, so we can have like 5 minutes just having a laugh and talking about our experiences and our stories. And it's just a really low stakes way of building that community and having a little bit of a laugh and sharing our stories. And it's a bit more organic and authentic. So yeah, that's how I would kind of approach things at the start of the year. As I said, like there's so many things I could talk about, but those are the three things that I've kind of knuckled down for the presentation.
Yeah.
But like as you're getting into the specifics, the overall of everything you're saying is proactive. It's not it's very purposefully not reactive. It is proactive to the point where not where you're micromanaging everything, but you're just putting forward the energy and the mindfulness and making decisions ahead of time in order to get ahead. Like, I mean, just of anything that you can. And creating a community doesn't happen by accident. Like it's the things that you're talking about. It's being mindful and specific and purposeful, and it takes planning and energy, but then that does pay off beautifully. Like the payoff is so huge when you kind of crack the code in like with the strategies that you're talking about.
Well, and I love what you said about
excited,
I love what you said about no, I apologize. I'm so excited to hear you say this because I think you're echoing a lot of what Marie and I have said, because, we suggest a lot of like challenging teaching strategies, and a lot of them are like, I'm thinking about like Socratic seminar. Yeah. I'm thinking about like, especially like discussion types of activities that are happening around sensitive material and sensitive topics and difficult conversations. Difficult conversations are even more difficult to have when the classroom environment doesn't feel safe or comfortable or all of the things that, we're describing here. And I think what I'm hearing you say is really just like a reminder to give teachers permission to take their time to get things where you want them to be. And not that you can't continue this, and you will continue this during the school year, but there's no rush to jump into content if we're not, kind of moving through like with these intentions at the center of that, of building that community that you're going to embody the expectations, not just throw them on the wall. Check, did that one. And now we're moving on, which I did for a lot of years. So I get it. So thank you for that.
Some people would say, oh, well, you shouldn't be doing it if it's not based around the curriculum, or like it's not. My view on that is, if you're doing something that will allow students to access the curriculum in a meaningful way because they feel safe and they trust each other, and you're going to get more value, like more bang for your buck in the hour, like that is an investment that is worth making in my book. So I would always encourage people to do that.
100%. Well, and we've lived it, right? We've lived through those different scenarios of when we do that and when we don't. And it can set you pretty far back when things don't work out that way. So I'm all about that.
Yeah, the reaction takes way more time out of
energy
progress than the proactive energy does. Yeah. So I have a question, because we've been talking about teachers and in the classroom and that sort of like student facing immediate sort of things and the strategies that we can find in your book and in your other work, in your podcast and your blog. Generally speaking, at least in my experience, our administrators are not in the classroom. Like, they're completely separate. They're up in a front office, and they are technically supporting staff and supporting teachers and supporting the school. And it doesn't necessarily always feel that way for a lot of people. Like, again, I have to say I consider myself very lucky to be where I'm at and have been for my entire career. But I know that a lot of classroom teachers specifically do not feel supported by their administration, by even just their other like supporting staff. What is maybe just like one daily practice, or I don't even know if it's a daily practice, but what is something that, for instance, an administrator could implement that would be truly supportive of this type of work for a classroom teacher, for students, for other staff members? I don't even know if that was a clear question, but you're not.
No, it definitely is. Yeah.
Makes me think that maybe I said something coherent.
It was very coherent. I'm listening to my toddler all day, so you just sound like
you got one up on the toddler, Marie.
I'll take it.
You got a few up on the toddlers. That's okay. It's like brain food. It's great. So one thing that was a game changer for me as an admin, I was still in the classroom as an admin, but that doesn't mean that people saw me in that way still, like it's still important to be front facing and for people to like that. Me being in the classroom is not being, it is being a leader because I'm modeling and stuff, but leading a staff team is really different. The one thing is just being present for the start of the day, like be at that front gate, be in the playground, greet students and stuff warmly, like model being present, model responding to little spotfires that come up, modeling how you respond to those little behaviors, because even if for the rest of the day things are chaotic and things are stressful and you're getting pulled from pillar to post, because that's what happens as an admin, you are showing up in a way in that morning that is needed so desperately to boost morale and be a part of your team and being seen as part of the school community. I know that admin are showing up in ways that, we don't see as teachers and students sometimes, but that's a part of the role, like that's your job. That's why you're getting paid the big bucks. But this is something that is so needed. So if you can't do the morning, do lunchtime. If you can't do lunchtime, do the afternoon bus duty or whatever you can do. Just get your face out there once a day so teachers know that you are there. Seeing admin just be able to, in the moment, respond to a challenging behavior, that does so much for staff morale, because they know that you're not just sitting behind a desk out of touch of what it's like to actually, be responding to behaviors. So that is what I would say. Just get your face out there, be present one time a day in a really positive context as well. Like, it's so nice to be welcoming staff and students at the gate.
Well, that's perfect timing. We just last week spoke with Principal Lamb. Do you follow Principal Lamb on Instagram?
Yeah.
Yeah, we just talked to him.
He's the what's it called? Yeah, the cart. Just to clarify, I'm not just saying
we sent him some accessories for his cart, so I'm like Great New Teaching merch for his cart. So yeah, and that's pretty much, I mean, that was the gist of our interview, was visibility does so much. Like, it's such a low hanging fruit, like, way to be supportive. Claire, this has been a delightful conversation. I feel like we need a part 2, a part 3, a part 4. Every season, we need a quick check-in. This is one of the most frequently asked questions that we get. And Marie and I really stick mostly to curriculum because there are so many other experts out there about behavior, and we're excited to send people your way. So thank you so much for being here. We will be sending you lots of questions, but is there anything else you'd like to just kind of send out into the universe before we wrap up today?
No, I'm just so appreciative of your work. I love, like we were talking before we pressed record, that like it's so nice to just be with other teachers in this context and talking about things in this way, and like just supporting other teachers. Like, we are just teachers supporting other teachers, and it's such a beautiful thing to be able to do. But if anybody wants to find my work, you can come and listen to the Unteachables podcast. I just, go on a little rant every week about something classroom management related, give you some actionable strategies and tips, which is brilliant. And I've just opened up, by the time this comes to air, I have just opened up the Behaviour Club. And we spoke about that a little bit with the return to school, starting the year strong. That is the focus for the month of August. And every month there's going to be another focus, because we just need a lot of support around this stuff, and support that actually just makes sense. So I'm so happy to be able to come here and support your listeners and your community, and what a beautiful community you have built.
Oh, thank you. Well, we are excited, like Amanda said, to send quite a few questions your way, because you have a very...
Ask away, please.
I think this is why your podcast is so successful, and why I just know that your book is going to go flying off the shelves. We're going to see it in a lot of different places in different school campuses, is because the way that you are able to articulate the things that are bouncing around all of our heads, but then you're like, oh, it's this. Yeah, it is. Oh my gosh.
That's a win. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So other than your podcast, The Unteachables, how else can our listeners get in contact with you and everything that you do?
So you can just head to the.unteachables on Instagram, and I hang out there most of the time. Or you can go to my website, which is just the-unteachables.com. And of course, the Unteachables podcast. I've made it very simple, just all the Unteachables.
Love it.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your words of wisdom. And where can everybody pick up your book?
In the US, I think it's definitely on Amazon everywhere. So just go onto Amazon. You can go to Barnes & Noble. I think that's a US company.
Yes.
But if you go to my my website as well, the-unteachables.com/book, I've got some links there too, so you can find it.
Okay. So when the next time you're stateside, we're going to get together and you're going to sign my copy, okay?
Absolutely. I'll send you one. That's fine.
Yay.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining us. We really do appreciate you. And we will have to catch up and do a little follow-up very, very soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, ladies.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, friends. We know that you probably needed to pull over your car, stop your treadmill, ignore your kids as you were walking through Trader Joe's with one earbud in. Not that I've ever done that. To probably jot down a few of the things that she was talking about. So again, we just want to remind you where you can get her book, where you can find more information. Really, the easiest place, I think, is to go to her website. It's the-unteachables.com, and you can find all sorts of information. Her podcast is phenomenal too. She did a whole series launching her book on each of the 7 pillars. Yeah, like I said at the beginning of this episode, we've got ourselves a little back to school series happening both here and in happy hour. So this is very much, we know, at the forefront of everybody's mind right now.
if you are really enjoying these kind of back to school interviews and the guests that we've had on lately, we would love to hear from you. Leave us a review on Apple, send us an email, chat with us over on Instagram. We would love to hear your reactions to the guests that we've chosen for this back to school season. And a quick reminder, if you have not already jumped in and joined us on Happy Hour this month, we are talking all about questioning strategies. Like Marie and I are all about inquiry. So this is going to be the month where we unveil and work through some of our best strategies for having students learn to ask their own questions. So don't miss it on Happy Hour this month.
Yes. Another thing we have coming up this month in light of back to school are some different things that we would say yes to and different things that we would pass on when it comes to prepping for back to school, actually getting your students into your classroom for the first few weeks of school, and everything that goes along with creating campus and classroom culture. What basically this or that? What are we like? Yes, absolutely. I'm diehard. And what could I pass on? That is in an upcoming Happy Hour episode coming to a podcast near you. So make sure that you join us.
Thank you for being here. And that was a super duper interview. I really can't wait to talk to her again. Claire, thank you.
Pumped.
Thank you, Claire.
Yes. And thank you, friends, for joining us. We will see you next time.
Bye. Thanks again for listening to Brave New Teaching.
We'd love to keep the conversation going over on Instagram.
And while you're there, check out the links in our bio for the most up-to-date events going on in the Brave New Teaching community.
Thanks for being here and have a great week at school.